I'm going to start with this because I think Nick Cruse right here from RBN makes a case way far better than I ever could for the kind of reason behind a Trump win not being a bad thing. And so I'm just going to play this for you right now.
I don't want to see him in power, but I think it's dire to allow the Biden administration and the Kamala Harris administration to be rewarded a mandate to commit genocide and start World War III. We need a pendulum to swing as much as possible. This was my position. When you see the momentum, look at George Bush when he gets 2 terms, the damage that he did. Look at the damage that Barack Obama did in 2 terms. Bill Clinton. It's a damage reduction strategy, but the worst thing we can do is allow one wing of the establishment to gain momentum and get the mandate to continue their policies. So we got to disrupt this shit every 4 years. That's my position. That's why I am rooting against Biden unapologetically. You brought up a good reason to do so, but the Biden administration tried to throw our brother Chairman Amali in prison for 15 years. So under the Biden administration, Black socialists and anti-war activists like myself are in danger. And all the progressive, all the Bernie Sanders leftists who are endorsing Joe Biden, the entire progressive media apparatus, like TYT, Majority Report, you notice they didn't cover that story, right?
That's such a great point. Did they cover Chairman O'Malley? I don't think so, because he's Russian. Just to stay positive for a second, though, Nick, I've been making this case for a few months now, probably for a year, that I think a Trump win is better for the country in general, because also, in addition to, giving the Democrats the L they deserve, it will suddenly turn the brunch liberals against wars. And a large part of the Trump coalition is anti-war. So once you combine those two forces, that's going to force Trump to be accountable as well to any of the anti-war rhetoric that he's using on the campaign trail. We'll see about Israel, of course, but let's keep going.
Because it will be very hard to sell the idea that an administration is the lesser two evil, as they are literally engaging in fascism, threatening to lock up activists in prison for 15 years. So I will not apologize for saying I want that faction of the establishment to lose. And when Trump takes charge, I'm going to root for him to lose next election, but we must have Biden lose. I'm a Joe Stein supporter, but that's...
So one quick aside, he's like, I'll root for Trump to lose the next election. I think he just means the Republicans, because Trump can't run again. That's another kind of bonus to a second Trump term, is he is a lame duck. He doesn't have to run again. Now, you could argue that he's going to want JD Vance or whoever his successor is to win, which if he does a good job, they have a really good shot at winning. If he does all the things that he's promising, maybe they do. But I think that's just to kind of clarify there. I think that's what Nick meant, because obviously Trump isn't going to have
my position as well. Before I move on, is there anything you want to ask, Scott? Anything that's on your mind before I move on to this next receipt?
Just a couple of things.
So this is beautiful right here, and I just want to let Scott talk, because again, this to me is such another sign that things are moving in the correct direction. Coalitions are forming around where we agree, and on the stuff where we don't agree, we can have those debates when those issues come up. But there's so much stuff that the majority of people who are, Democrat or Republican leaning agree on, that if we don't forego all that bullshit, none of that is ever going to come to fruition. So there's just like a tiny kernel of hope in this kind of thing, for me anyway.
Yeah, I said I respect your position on the U.S. military 100%, and I would be it would be one of the most difficult things in my life if I had a son approaching adulthood who asked me, "Hey, Daddy, I'd like to follow in your footsteps and join the Marine Corps." I have to tell you, the Marine Corps was some of the finest. It was. I'm so proud of what I accomplished in the Marine Corps and what the Marine Corps made me. The opportunities that were provided. I I got rid of nuclear weapons as a Marine. You know, that was sort of a cool thing. You know, you know, and the challenges they were given, it was wonderful. But what I always tell people is that when you join the Marine Corps, you have to be totally apolitical. When you join the military, you're apolitical. You can't say I'm joining because I like this president or that president, because the next president may be somebody you don't like, and you're going to have to obey those orders. You have to trust the people whom the American public puts into office to do the right thing, to ensure that before they send you to war, that they've exhausted every possible venue short of war to prevent that war. And sadly, we don't have American leadership that does that. War is the first option, and therefore there's a 99.99.
I just want to stop real quick on that point he made about the military being a nonpartisan thing. I kind of feel like it is that. You know, most people that join the military definitely have that kind of a worldview, because, as he said, to have this multiple
99% chance that if you join the military today, you're going to be asked to engage in a conflict, which if you were a sane private citizen, you would be dead set against, but now you have no choice but to participate in. And so the answer would be not now. Don't join now. You can't join now because, and this hurts me to say this, but in many ways, because of our foreign policy, America is not a country worth fighting for. Because you're not fighting for America, you're fighting for something else. You're fighting for Israel, you're fighting for Ukraine, you're fighting for the military-industrial complex, you're fighting for American global hegemony. But
how can you argue with this either? This is an ex-military, former military person, a well-decorated guy who has a history of integrity, who spoke out against the Iraq War, telling you he wouldn't join the military right now because it's not fighting for America. And that is crazy to think about. We've known this, for a lot of us who pay attention have known this for a long time, but it, like, mainstream, people in mainstream positions are now saying this out loud.
Last thing you're fighting for is the Constitution and the defense of American freedom. The best way to fight for American freedom is right here at home, doing what Chairman O'Malley and Penny Hess and the Uhura Three have been doing.
I just realized I used the term mainstream in relation to Scott Ritter. A lot of people would say, "Oh, Scott Ritter is not mainstream." I think he is in the world we live in today, where the corporate press is not the mainstream anymore. And I showed you a couple episodes ago the data to back that up, that streaming is much more prominent now than broadcast or cable is. It's like a boomer thing. I think Scott Ritter is mainstream. I think RBN, I think Jimmy Dore, Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, they're the new mainstream.
Standing up for their beliefs. And I'll just say this, you know who I am in my background, right? I'm a Reagan Republican, all right? I'm unabashed Ronald Reagan Republican. I don't claim that Reagan was perfect and all that. I'm just telling you, hey, that's how old I am, and those are my political roots. But I'm going to be marching side by side Chairman O'Malley on November 3rd in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to be speaking at the conference on November 2nd in Washington, D.C. in support of the Uhura Three. A white Ronald Reagan Republican is going to be there standing up, because it's the most American thing I can do, to stand up for freedom of speech, stand up for freedom of press, stand up for their right to do that which they believe needs to be done. I've told Chairman O'Malley, I can't say that I am naturally drawn to his cause.
So right here, I just want to pause for 1 second and highlight this, because Scott Ritter spills his guts right here, and this is just a moment of such intense honesty, and you can see on Nick's face he appreciates it, man. Cheers to Nick for doing this interview, because this is a great one.
That doesn't mean his cause is bad. It means I'm ignorant. I'm ignorant of the cause. And I will also plead guilty, and I've done this to his face, of not wanting to be drawn to the cause, because it scares me. When I hear black nationalism, when I hear things like that, I mean, my imagination goes wild. Probably.
This is what I loved about Public Enemy when I originally came into them, is they had this kind of militant, scary, like, we scare the shit out of white people, I don't want to say facade. I mean, now that Chuck D is working for the State Department, maybe, but aura about them, you know, like, I mean, and that's it, back then it is what they were, but I think just the dynamics have shifted enough that, you know, someone like Chuck D, who's kind of comfortable and retired, can forego a lot of those youthful ideals that he once had.
Because I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, and I have inherent internal programming that, makes me afraid of black people in the street at night, something like that. I'm just being honest.
All white people have that to some degree. Just, it's part of you, it's wired into you, like he said, and fucking cheers to him for his honesty about that. Because once you acknowledge some shit like that, that's how you get rid of it. Once you're honest about it, that's how you dispel it and obliterate it, evaporate it from existence.
Honest, I'm not going to lie to you.
I appreciate the honesty, at least.
And so, I have to confront this and say, hey, your belief system's sort of screwed up, and you need to work your way through this and do that. And the thing that united Chairman O'Malley and I was freedom of speech, the Constitution. But I love the way he explained it to me. He said, you're a white guy. The Constitution was written for you. Slave. Constitution was not written for me. The Constitution.
You know what, though? I want to stop here for just a second, because even though that might be true, that doesn't mean we can't, it doesn't apply to everyone now. Now that society has shifted, it's still the foundational document that we can interpret through these evolved eyes, So anyway, I'm going to let him keep going. Sorry, I keep
actually written to keep me out of the Constitution. And he said, so you white people, and I didn't take offense at this. He said, you became lazy about the Constitution. You just accepted it at face value. It was there. If you wanted to take advantage of it, you could. If you didn't, you didn't have to. He said, even when slaves were liberated, freed, so the Constitution wasn't for us. We had to educate ourselves on the Constitution, learn the Constitution, and then learn how to use the Constitution. He says, we being the black nationalists, he said, we know more about the Constitution than most white. And I'm like, he's right. He's 100% right. And as somebody who took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States with my life against all enemies, foreign and domestic, I'm looking at a defender of the Constitution in Chairman O'Malley. And I went, I like this guy, and I like his cause. I can't say that I agree with everything. I mean, there's nobody. You and I could sit down and have a beer, and I can guarantee that we'll agree to a lot, and some stuff will go, don't agree. That's okay. That's not a problem, because we respect each other. We work through it. I'm sure there's something in Chairman O'Malley's platform that I'm going to go, I don't know. And I'm sure there's a lot about what I do. He's going to go, I don't know. But that doesn't mean we have to be enemies. And it doesn't mean we can't be friends. And I am marching with the Uhuru Three and their movement.
And I'll just pause for a second to whip myself a little bit, because, people like us, you could make that argument about Chuck D, and the State Department and the shit he's doing with the State Department. Like, just because he's doing some shit with them doesn't mean he agrees with everything that they believe, and vice versa. So just to give Chuck D a little bit of more respect there, that is an argument that could be used in his favor as well.
On November 3rd, because it's the right thing to do. Where are the progressives? Where is Code Pink? Where is Bernie Sanders? Where are all the screaming left-wing liberals out there professing their love for Black Americans and how much they appreciate the Black American cause? I'm not saying that I know damn well I'm not perfect. I just told you, I've got a lot of racism, sort of ingrained in this DNA, not because I want to be a racist. It's just, I was raised to, when I was a kid.
And you see it so much more as someone who lived in LA the largest portion of my life. We're kind of insulated to it. Like, LA is much like a metro city. It's much more like, I guess, hippy dippy, if you could use the term. I feel like I've been insulated to that kind of thing. But also, he makes a great point in that it's wired into all of us on some level. And I love these conversations, like I said, because they're you bring it to the surface, and that's how you get
blacks and whites couldn't get married, and if they were married, man, it was a problem. I remember on the military base, a black pilot showed up in my father's squadron in the late 1960s, married to a white lady. This is in Michigan. It was a big thing, like, oh, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? How do we deal with this? What do we do? And when he went to squadron officer,
man, honestly, this whole conversation was brilliant. Go watch it. And I wanted to highlight just kind of Scott Ritter's path and really Nick's fire explanation of his position on this election cycle, because that's a position that I share 1000%. And I think he did a beautiful job of putting it into words in a way that I haven't been able to yet. So thank you, Nick.